I want to talk about Ukraine and the arguing, the pleading from MPs here and in Kyiv to do more to put pressure on Putin and help Ukraine with a single stroke. Members of the Foreign Affairs Committees at Westminster and in Kyiv want to see hundreds of billions of euros in Russian reserves, well, used and taken away from the Western banking system, used to buy weapons, and when peace is achieved, to help pay for the rebuilding of that country. Ministers seem to be broadly supportive. Trouble is, some lawyers believe it can't be done in accord with international law. And bankers, some of them, seem worried that seizing Russian billions will discourage other regimes from using those banks in future. I spoke earlier to Lee Turner, who was the UK ambassador to Ukraine.
Really, John, I think we have to ask ourselves, is it reasonable for us to think imaginatively about ways to hurt Russia economically? At the moment, they have an undeclared war against us. They're subverting our institutions. We've heard about these cyber attacks. We've seen signs, apparently, that the Russians have been trying to put bombs on aeroplanes, on DHL, really appalling things. We've seen shopping centres burned down in Poland and other such attacks on countries way beyond Ukraine. And I think we do need to think very actively about how we can use this money. Sure, there are important long-term principles we need to take account of, but Russia's gone so far beyond anything that's reasonable in this appalling war. Clearly, killing hundreds of thousands of people is an awful act of aggression, and anything we can do to put pressure on Russia to pull its forces out to end this war as soon as possible, we should be doing.
Former British ambassador to Ukraine there, Lee Turner. Now, let's say hello, welcome to the programme, Emily Thornberry, Labour MP, who chairs the Foreign Affairs Committee at Westminster. Hi to you, Emily. Thank you for coming.
Hello.
Hi, and we're also joined by Oleksandr Merezhko, who is the chair of the Ukrainian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. Hello to you, Oleksandr. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's always a great pleasure to be with you.
And good to have you here. Emily, can I come to you first? First of all, this seizure, the idea of seizing, taking and using maybe 300 billion euros worth of Russian reserves in the Western banking system. No doubt that would be a huge boost to the war effort, a huge aid to Ukrainian reconstruction, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we have been working closely with our friends, our brothers and sisters in the Ukrainian parliament and talking to them about how much more we can do, how can we help, what can we do next. We really feel that the Ukrainians are fighting this war on behalf of all of us. We have to defeat Russia. If they are able to win in Ukraine, they won't stop there. And it's completely wrong what they've done. So they do need to be held to account, which is why Oleksandr and I have written an op-ed for Politics Home about what we think the next step should be. And that is that the Russians have got Russian state assets in Britain and in Europe, and they've got huge amounts. I mean, we think there might be 26 billion in Britain and probably something like 300 billion in Europe. Largely. Yeah. And we just think that in the circumstances, given that, that Ukraine is crying out for help and are doing so well and are, have been fighting on for 3 years, we should do everything we can. And this war is illegal. I mean, the Russians just invaded Ukraine. They have no right to do this. And it seems to me, I think both Oleksandr and I are both lawyers, and our view is that it is completely within international law for us to be able to seize those assets and to use them to rebuild Ukraine.
Yeah, Oleksandr, it must be so frustrating for you to see, governments, in this country and elsewhere wrangling about this instead of just getting on with it.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to express some of the most sincere gratitude personally to Madam Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the UK Parliament, to British people, to your government for taking leadership on this extremely important issue. Of course, it is frustrating that not everyone understands the necessity and that it is completely in line with principles of international law to not only to freeze, but also to confiscate this money and to transfer to the victim of the aggression, because it's part of international legal responsibility, accountability of the aggressor. And I'm glad that, for me, the UK has always associated with international law, with, principles of international law and commitment to international law. And I'm glad that we found understanding in your country of this extremely important issue.
I mean, Emily, you were both convinced, and as you say, you're both lawyers, that this is perfectly in accord with international law. So why are we having this legal wrangle? Why is it not a clear-cut case? And in government, are we seeing ministers on one side and the Attorney General on the other?
Well, I think it goes like this. I think that when it comes to international law, you can quite often find international lawyers on both sides of an argument. I mean, that is how it is. And what one needs to do is marry up international law, make sure that you have a sound legal basis, which is what we believe. But then quite often it also needs to link up with politics and with economics. And I think that we really also need to look at the central bank in Europe, who are concerned that it might put off other investors if people felt that their assets could be seized and then confiscated.
Yeah.
To which I say, well, don't invade your neighbour then. I mean, don't invade your neighbour illegally. And if you do, then your assets might be confiscated. But hopefully there isn't money from other countries in the European Central Bank of countries who are thinking of invading their next door neighbours.
Yeah. And the question, I suppose, of putting off other potential savers and investments in other countries, other parts of the world, Oleksandr, that's a political and a moral question, not a legal one, isn't it? And in that, but again, you will say the argument is very, very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. This issue has different dimensions, including not only legal or international legal dimension. It also has moral and political issue. And from legal point of view, we have strong precedents created by Canada, by their legislation, by the United States. And there is a number of resolutions adopted by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. So we have strong legal support of this case. But at the same time, it's a matter of political will, or to be more exact, the lack of political will, especially from some countries which have this Russian money and which are reluctant to give up these Russian assets.
In the high-level diplomacy surrounding the war in Ukraine, Oleksandr, you've expressed worry about America being taken in by Russian disinformation, but also about some key players like the Russia envoy Steve Witkoff are being linked to business in Russia. Can you explain to me, what do you mean? What business links in Russia are you referring to?
Well, there was during the discussion in the online format, sitting kind of with both committees, one of my colleagues raised this issue that, as far as we know, at least there is a claim that Mr. Witkoff has economic or business ties with Russia. And to us, it's very concerning. It's very worrisome. And I think that we need investigation, because it might have effect upon his position on Russia, upon his relations with Putin. And thereby, he's a close friend of Mr. Trump, of the president. And Mr. Trump relies on his advice. And it might be dangerous when we come to taking important decisions with regard to Ukraine. That's why we need to at least to investigate this issue, to explore it.
Do you have thoughts on that, Emily?
Well, we did have yesterday we had a joint meeting of the two foreign affairs select committees, and that was and with the Ukrainians online, obviously, and it was really interesting to see the different perspectives and to hear from different members of Ukraine's parliament. There is a concern that the future of Ukraine shouldn't be just looked at in terms of business. Ukraine is more than just what a businessman might see, and to make sure that any agreement is not just simply a business deal, but is a proper agreement and results in there being a just and lasting peace for the people of Ukraine, who, as I've said, have been so brave, so determined, so resolute. I mean, just, you have to take your hat off to the Ukrainians, just, how resolute they are. They are not giving up their country no matter what. And for my recent visit there, I was so struck by just the courage of the country. Really struck.
Oleksandr, do you have high hopes at all of further sanctions now being applied on Russia that will make a difference, that will actually force Putin to think again?
Well, first of all, again, we're grateful to the UK because it's important when you show the leadership on this issue and you have implemented important sanctions against Russia. The thing is that the final goal, the ultimate goal of sanctions is to stop Russian war machine from functioning. And to do that, we need to deny Russia these revenues, profits from selling Russian oil and gas. So this should be the final goal, and the question how to stop Russian war machine. We are grateful to the European countries, our allies, for implementing sanctions, but I believe that more can be done. Definitely more can be done with regard to shadow fleet, with regard to secondary sanctions, because, you know, there are countries which help Russia to evade primary sanctions, such countries as China, as India, as Turkey, their companies. And I strongly believe that such secondary sanctions can stop Russia from function in its war machine, actually.
All right, Oleksandr Merezhko. Yeah, Emily.
I was talking to somebody today who was saying that if we could stop the Indians from buying so much oil from Russia, that would really make a big difference.
All right, Emily Thornberry and Oleksandr Merezhko, thank you both.